To an end and to embark in Professor Mohamed Chtatou's presentation, which was initially meant for the early morning session. The presentation is entitled Tamazight, Ancestral Oral Knowledge and the Danger of its Extinction in the Reef Region. The floor is yours, Professor Chtatou. You have 20 minutes and 10 minutes for discussion.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm sorry I couldn't be here in the morning. I was teaching, so I apologize for that. When we talk about language and culture and diversity, of course, we always think of language as a vehicle for communication, but also for culture and civilization. So it's not only related to words used for the meaning, but also what we do in our daily lives, what actual activities, literary activities we undertake in everyday life. So when we are talking about Tamazight, one of the reasons why Tamazight survived in Morocco, and probably it's true also of Tamzgha, the whole of North Africa, is the fact that there was a strong will among the people to use it on a daily basis. To use it in communication instead of other languages. To use it to express identity. I think the word identity is very strong. And I'll come back to that word later on when we talk about diaspora, as Selema said. You know, identity among the Amazigh people has always been strong, still strong, and it is one of the reasons why Tamazight is surviving. But still, we must say it's endangered. Some aspects of Tamazight are even reaching the level of extinction, to say the least. And I will be talking about them in a little while. So, why is Tamazight survived? One of the answers I heard from an anthropologist I was working with lately is the geographical boundaries, the mountains. The mountains have made the people speak the language. I dispute that, because there are other places in the world where the mountains did not save people from losing their languages and losing their idiom. So we cannot use it as an excuse or as a scientific argument to explain that. I think there is something else more than that. The reason why Tamazight in Tamzgha, or in the whole of North Africa where Tamazight is spoken, survived. There is something which I call the Amazigh or Trinity. What is the Amazigh Trinity? Well, it's simple, three things. Number one is the language, Tamazight itself. The language has a sacred element in it. Sacred because people really think of it more than a vehicle of communication. It's almost like a religion, as it were. So it's very strong when people say Tamazight, meaning the way they talk, the way they speak, the way they use it on a daily basis for communication. Number two is Tamort, or Tamazight, or whatever you want to call it. The land has a special interest. Actually, in the reef area, selling the land is almost considered as a sin. It has a religious meaning. You don't sell your land, even if you are bankrupt, you don't sell it. You find other ways to get money from people, and there are several ways you can do. And people will help you out anyway with money, so you don't sell that land of yours, which is your identity again. I come back to the word identity, which I think is very important. Number three is what we call Tamunt. Tamunt mean together. Tamunt is if you want, solidarity, is collective solidarity. And if you remember, during one thing that happened recently in Morocco, during the earthquake in Al-Haws, I think this feeling of Tamount, which is Berber, which is Amazigh, in all Moroccans, I told people this actually, in all Moroccans came out suddenly, and they were sending all these things. Even sending diapers to people in the mountains, you know. People in the mountains don't use diapers for children, they use other things. But anyway, that's the Berber instinct. That's the Amazigh instinct in every Moroccan. And I consider that 100% Moroccans are Berber, you know, or they have that kind of instinct, Berber instinct in them. Even if they speak Arabic, or they say, even the Arabic they speak is Berber anyway. And I have explained this in a different article at different times. Anyway, so Tamount is very important, because how do we express Tamount Tamazight in the Berber areas is something we call Tuiza, the collective. That's the collective aspect. When you want to marry your children, people, the whole community will come together and help you. One will bring food, one will bring the musicians, another will help you with his house or whatever. If you want to build a house, the same thing. If you want to reap your crops, the same thing is done. So I think these three things are extremely important, and we find them all over North Africa, not only the area I come from, which is the Rif Mountains. Now, coming back to the Rif Mountains and talking about endangered languages or almost extinct practices, because we have the two. We have the endangered language and we have almost extinct practices that are related to the language itself, because they're part of it. Now, let's look at the endangered language. Indeed, the language is endangered in the sense that there is no way of revitalizing the language. All the stakeholders are not interested. And I will give you at the end of this presentation a list of them. I'll save it for the end. List of these stakeholders who have the name, but they don't do the job, or they don't deliver, you know. Anyway, in the area where I come from, one of the things that people who are sent from the Ministry of the Interior to work there, as representative of the Ministry of the Interior, learn when they arrive there that if they don't speak Tamazight, don't speak Tarifit, they don't survive. They can't last very long. In a month, a letter is written to the ministry saying this guy is not doing the job properly, please take him. And please take him, they mean it. Because if they don't, the ministry doesn't take him, they will do something wrong to the guy. So most of the people who go there have to learn the language to communicate, because no other thing in the area where I come from is spoken. Arabic is not spoken at all. So you have to learn that. So for communication, this is extremely important to learn the language. Unfortunately, the ministries that are concerned don't have, like in the United States, where you have schools for diplomats to teach the language of the country where you go. They don't have that kind of information or that kind of attitude towards Tamazight. To train these people who will go to work there, you know, for the ministries, to speak the language, to be able to survive and to communicate on a daily basis. Coming back to the language itself. Endangered, yes. Endangered because, as I said, there are no means of revitalization. Now let's look at these aspects of the language. Number one, Isran. Isran are the private couplets, poetry, that is used on almost daily basis, I might say. For every occasion, people use Isran for celebrations, for daily practice, to mean something, to send a message. And often it's women who perfect this art. I think if we have Israel in the Rif, it's thanks to the women. And by the way, the women are considered in the Rif as an important element and guardians of the culture. Guardians of the culture. It's not men, it's women. Because women teach the children the language and emphasize this, but they also engage in other activities that are related to the language. And I just said poetry, Isran. Isran are used in a pedagogical way to bring the community to Tamunt, bring the community together. Because during the celebrations, feasts, like marriages, like whatever, the Isran are a form of criticism if something is going wrong, but also a form of news, 8 o'clock news, whatever, as a form of extending invitations to people to do something. So it has that kind of thing that you cannot find elsewhere in other languages. Israel is very important. And it has survived through thousands of years, 8,000 years, that's probably the least I can say. They existed, the language existed for that long. So, the Israel have existed. They are used in every wedding, every ceremony, circumcision, and it's important because Israel is thinking, is giving this information, is getting people together. Now, the second point, which is also important, is that is losing ground, and this is, well, it's becoming extant, almost extant, is fables, stories, and proverbs. These are used to be very strong in society. Unfortunately, they are losing. When I was a child, I remember my grandmother who was sitting around the fire in winter, and she would tell us all these stories, these beautiful stories. There was no television, no internet, no nothing like this, and there was communication. This Tamunt, this is exactly what Tamunt means, being around the fire, a group of people around the fire. This is disappearing, almost. I saw only one example in the diaspora in Holland, where people were trying to revive that. But that's something that is disappearing, and unfortunately, it's something that almost, as I said, almost totally extinct. And if we don't do anything about that, it will go. But I don't see the people who are being sort of asked to do work in the Tamazight area, doing the proper job here in that area. Now, I was saying women. Women are very important in our society. Important in the sense that they bring this plus to the culture. I said they revitalize the language, they perpetuate the language, they safeguard the language, but also they have something else. Women in the Rif make rugs or carpets, to use a British word. They use carpets, but these carpets are in fact made during a special time, during when the woman is feeling pregnant. So she puts the loom on, sets the loom, and starts the carpet. Why? This is what I call a numerical language, because in the carpet it's a calendar. And a calendar which will tell you the 9 months. And there are 9 motifs there, which is also a language which we have to decipher. And I will come to this kind of language also in a moment, because you'll find it also in tattoos, in pottery, in everything. But these carpets, if you want a Berber, actually, this is an advice for people who want to buy a Berber carpet. If you want a Berber carpet and you went into a shop and they will give you a Berber carpet that is perfectly geometrical, that's a machine carpet, it's not a Berber carpet. Berber carpets are made by hand, they're not machine. Okay, a Berber carpet that women make during pregnancy starts very wide and comes down like this. It's the idea of birth, which we us men cannot give. Only women can give birth. Okay, and they have a special value in Tamazight, in Tarifit, for giving birth. Special value for doing that particular thing, which us, again, we cannot do. Anyway, the important thing is these rugs. Okay, these rugs still exist, and they are not endangered, but something has to be done about them. The other things that are endangered, that are part of the language, they're related to the language. I mentioned pottery. In the 1940s, somebody invented, I think the Japanese, invented plastic. And as a result, that's the worst invention humanity has ever had, because it killed other things that are pottery. And I love pottery. My mother used to make pottery and to do drawings on it. Actually, they were not drawings, they were language, which we find in tattoos. And tattoos is a language we find in carpets. And if you want this deciphering, get in touch with me. I'll give you all the deciphering of this language. I have it. Now, I have 5 minutes.
It's a pleasure listening to you.
Okay, thank you very much. I started at the beginning, we have to make a difference between endangered and almost to extinct. There are a lot of things, unfortunately, that are going to be lost. The people who went in the diaspora called themselves Zwa Aman. Zwa Aman means cross the water. It's a beautiful metaphor they use, they still use it. They don't call themselves migrants, because the word migrant is kind of strong, it's kind of almost obscene word. So they called Zwa Aman, we cross the water to the other side. These people have invented new language, new Tarifit language, a new Tarifit culture, which is extremely important for us to discover. But the most important thing is that they are trying to revive things that did not exist in our society, like the cinema, to create the cinema, to create artistic expressions, taking stock from the rights again. That's our artistic expression, the most important one that we have up to date. The people who are supposed to do things, stakeholders, come back to your word. Thank you for that. Stakeholders who are supposed to do something about preserving the endangered language are not doing it. Let me say that in Morocco we have IRCAM. IRCAM, for me, is an self-perpetuating organization. You know what self-perpetuating organization means. It's a very bureaucratic. When you go inside, it's all bureaucracy. It's no research, or very little research. I was thinking that IRCAM could send people doing PhDs on Berber language to go into different Berber areas and collect things that may disappear or will disappear in 10 or 20 years. Nothing is done like that. Okay, so unfortunately, IRCAM is kaput, as the Germans would say. The other thing, I think some universities have to think about grants to students to do research in areas. I see a lot of, currently I have a group of American students at the International University of Rabat doing anthropology, and they are going to go, there are 25 of them, they are going to go into different areas of Morocco, Berber areas in Morocco, because if you want to study anthropology in Morocco, you go to Berber areas, you don't go elsewhere. And they are going to do research in several areas of interest that might, if they don't do research on these things, they will lose some of the practices. For example, just to give you an example, we house, you know, the transhumance in the house. How many people know about that? Transhumance in the house is very important. How people live of this transhumance of you know, going up the mountain in the summer and coming down, and all that goes with it. Somebody has done work on the carpets and the term used in carpets, bailen, from School of Oriental and African Studies, but we don't see people doing things on other things. For example, language, for example, practices, and anthropology in general. So I'm sorry, I have taken too much time.
You have a few seconds.
Oh, I have a few seconds. Okay, so
That's it, let's go.
so I think we can also call on UNESCO to save endangered language. I don't see UNESCO doing much on there.
We'll tell you about that later.
Well,
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Professor Chtatou, for this enlightening presentation. I have made sure, and I think the audience as well, to follow you articulated word for word. Yeah, you talked about stakeholders. Some, independent researchers call IRCAN instead. So, and it's more of a plea to help them, start the field work and be in the service of this endangered language. I give the floor to the professor first.
Yeah, thank you. Just want to point out one thing that Mohamed has been talking about the riff. That he said at one point, this is common in all Berber culture. I can basically say that 600, 700 kilometers ago, you can find what he called Touaza, in Kabylie it's called Thiwizi. You can find Israel, you can find all those things. And it's exactly the same thing, and you'll find it everywhere. The language with the designs, the traditional design, is the same, and then you can find it among the Tuareg as well, obviously. And another thing which is very similar with Algeria and Morocco is that Algeria also has its equivalent of IRCAN. It's called the La Haute Autorité à la Mazirité, the higher authority of the Mazirité. We haven't called it IRCAN because it's difficult. No, Mazirité, they use that. But unfortunately, because it's in French and it's long, then nobody found the equivalent of IRCAN. That's okay. But one important thing, one important aspect, as I said, it's also the ban on selling land, obviously, and the transhumans doesn't do it, but it hasn't. The folk tales, which are the central thing, with poetry, the folk tales are the central life of northern Berber communities. And in fact, Kabylie has, as you know, a treasure of folk tales which is considered by all the folklorists and the specialists as one of the top 3 largest and richest things in the Mediterranean. When I was a kid, I grew up in Kabylie, and by the age of 9 or 10, I knew 250 folk tales, and we would gather every evening and we all would tell them all, and we exchanged that, and we learned them things. And some time ago, I went back after a long absence, and I was really looking forward to that. I went to the village, and I was expecting to see all those guys with their white coats of umbrellas, etc. And there was nobody there. And I said, my God, what's happened to it? And somebody another said, yeah, don't you know, they're watching Dallas. And Dallas was a TV series which penetrated for the first time. So now these folk tales are replaced by American or whatever foreign TV series. And thank God we're talking about documenting endangered languages or revitalizing them. If it had not been for the likes of the very first person to document Berber folk tales was the German explorer Leo Frobenius in the late 19th century. But then later on, the likes of Camille Lacoste du Jardin, for instance, of that. Nobody knows them. Thankfully, they're written in French or German or English, and other people are reading them. But the people from whence it came, don't know it. This rich heritage of things, and it's really, if it's encouraging people to learn the language, but also what goes with it, and the culture, revitalizing it. Hence, I'm going back again to the theatre, to the music that it was talking about. This is part of the thing. You take it, the diaspora allows you to save it sometimes, if it's threatened at home. That's why I say the Algerian government had a strange way of encouraging diaspora by following it up with the thing that ran away from home. But the diaspora helps, but it's not the only way. And if it's lost at home, then it's very difficult because you have to bring it back from the diaspora. And anyway, that's probably the only thing I'm going to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Now I open the debate. Questions, comments. I start with Professor UNESCO. Is it on?
It's on, yeah, it's on.
You mentioned
It's not on, and they can hear you online if it's not on.
That one, that's it.
it's on.
That's on.
You mentioned Israel. Could you referred to it at one point as travelers, and but you also implied that it was existing in both spoken and written form. Could you give us a bit of a closer definition of Israel?
In where I come from, Israel or rhyme and couplet used with music. But the most important thing is not that. Actually, it's the message that it carries. Israel are used to carry a message. As I said, it's either so filling you in on the community, what's going on in the community, or giving advice, or solving problems. If there are any conflicts within different clans, we go here on a kind of anthropological ground, and also giving good news. So it's almost like what I said. It's the 8 o'clock news, you know, where people would get to know about what's going on in the community, in the small community where this activity is taking place, whether it's a wedding, whether it's a circumcision or any other thing. So that's the rhyme couplets. They are easy to make and easy to remember too. So that makes them kind of go around the community and do whatever is expected to do.
Both oral and written.
Yeah.
Yeah, the second question over there. Comment?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for your efforts and for sharing your thoughts.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you for sharing your thoughts.
Can you speak out loud without?
No, they can't hear online if they.
Can you? Okay.
Yeah.
Keep it close a little bit. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I would like to say thank you for sharing your thoughts. I don't think it's working, so I'll try to speak louder. So you started your insightful talk by asking the
I
question.
can't hear you.
We don't
I'm
hear
sorry.
And you can't hear you
Can you
online.
try to use the microphone, please?
Yeah, in that direction.
No, there you go.
1, 2.
Yeah.
Let's go. So you started your insightful talk by
It's not working. Is it?
Just go for it. It's not working.
It's only working until you say so.
Can you use this one?
You can come closer, please. Please be briefing your question. It's okay, she can do it.
good afternoon, everyone, once again. So I said thank you for your sharing your thoughts, and my question. Okay. So you started your insightful talk by asking the question, why did Amazigh people manage to preserve the language? And you provided the answer that the anthropologists you worked with, and you said how a mountainous area has helped in this sense. But you disputed his idea by providing the argument. There are other languages in the same type of areas, but they didn't manage to do the same thing. However, I do not agree with you, because if we take the example of Moroccan, for example, there are people who, not necessarily in mountainous areas, but in remote areas, who manage to preserve their languages, and people probably who belong to the same groups living in cities do not do the same thing. I do not think that's necessarily related to their attitudes toward their languages, but to the nature of the environments in which they live. Because in this type of mountainous areas or remote areas, people do not really have much contact with other communities with different languages, and they do not necessarily have to assimilate to them. So they do not have the need to learn other languages or to use other languages. For us, it's the case for people who live in communities with different people who speak different languages. So that's.
Thank you very much.
Well, first of all, I come back to the idea that geographical reasons used by some people is wrong. I disagree with that totally. Examples are strife around the world, and no need to go into that. But I'll tell you something else which I didn't say, is that in fact, besides the trinity that I mentioned, probably that's not enough for you, there is the idea, which is an anthropological idea, which has been proved by several anthropologists working in Morocco, is the fact that there is the solidarity within the community. That is to say, as I mentioned earlier, that if you don't speak the language, people will not talk to you back. People from the Ministry of Interior have had to come back and learn the language to go back to function properly. So there is that kind of community. And that's Tamunt again, going back to that idea of community, where everybody speaks the language and everybody expects you, even if you are not from the area, to learn the language and use it on a daily basis. So that's one of the most important elements that have preserved the language. I can give you another examples from the diaspora. The diaspora have all these refugee people going to Holland, to Germany, and living in areas, I wouldn't say kind of ghetto kind of thing, but they are together. And the reason they live in the same area is the fact that they can communicate with each other in the same language. And they have even gone one step further, create new words and new concepts, which we discover ourselves, you know, when we go and visit them or when they come back. And which means that excuse me, which means that the language has been revitalized, you know, and made sort of alive for them to continue.
Thank you. Professor Salim will briefly get back to this.
Sorry, yes. It's just this thing, it's a cliche, and it goes back to 19th century historians, and some of them dug it out from Ibn Khaldun, and because of the mountains and plains, etc. And then French sociologists like Yves Lacoste, for instance, and René, what's his name? René Galissot, who wrote Maximal. All these things about the mountains, but it goes beyond that actually, because there's this myth that Berbers survived the Roman Empire because they lived in the mountains. It's utter rubbish, because the Roman Empire was actually made of Berbers with a few soldiers all over the place. The civilization that you see all over North Africa, we call it the Roman ruins, they were built by Berbers during the Roman Empire. They used the Roman architecture just like now, I mean, during things there was French architecture or anything like that. So this myth that was created and everybody's stuck in it. They went to the mountains, they survived, they existed. It actually has no sociological or historical basis. But anyone who says that basically is a sort of a lazy scientist, and a lot of so-called, and I'm sorry, Mohamed, anthropology is not about that. It's just some anthropologists, especially those who specialize in North Africa.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. No, it's not you, miss. If you don't mind, it's the lady.
No, it's
Then, Professor.
All right, I think it's working. So thank you so much for the rich insights. You mentioned the UNESCO. Well, there was the UNESCO Universal Declaration on Cultural Diversity, which aims at safeguarding the linguistic heritage. but I think this is more centered in Europe, where, for example, the Europe Council in 1992 adopted a treaty called the Charter for Minority Languages, and 33 countries actually signed this treaty, but I think, and this actually drove many countries to adopt many educational projects that would include these minority languages in the instruction of schools. But the problem here is I'm not sure whether such initiatives are actually, do actually exist in other continents like Africa or Asia.
Can I answer this?
Thank you.
Can I answer this?
We'll give the floor to the speaker first,
Yeah,
if you don't mind.
I worked with UNESCO for a long period of time, and I can tell you there are lots of things that go on paper. But there are conferences on endangered languages, and then it's on paper. It's written and it goes into the library of UNESCO in Paris, and that's it. And it's the end of it. I don't believe in this kind of. It's like ERCAM. ERCAM does exactly the same thing, So we don't see any result in the end, ERCAM has not even published the PhDs of people who have done work, excellent work, to make them available to the rest of the people, right? You agree with me?
Yeah.
Okay. Very good work done by students who are professors now. They haven't even published that, but they published the PhD of the director, whatever he's called. That's his was published. That's how they function. Anyway, UNESCO. I don't believe in UNESCO very much, to tell you the truth. It's very much like all these other organizations. So much work, so much paperwork, and it's just blue tape. In America, the Americans killed the Indians and destroyed their culture. But then when the Americans became a world power, they realized they've done something wrong. And they went back on that, and they started working on everything that was lost, bringing it back, and giving the Indians all the possibilities to use that. And they have hundreds of organizations that work on that area. In our case, which organizations are working on that? There are several in Morocco, but none of them. They organize conferences like UNESCO, and it goes on paper, and we never see the end of it.
Thank you. A brief note to be made by Professor.
Yeah, you mentioned the European Charter. It's a charter of the Council of Europe, not of the European Union or anything like that. And its main purpose is to sort of what they call minority languages, but they're actually regional minorities, and they exclude entirely diaspora languages. So they're not interested in preserving all the languages like Arabic we've been talking about, or anything like that. It's regional languages. Even then, notoriously, a couple of countries did not even sign it, and one of them, the leader of that, is France. So that is basically almost, as Mohamed says, it's sort of that doesn't even deserve a reference. UNESCO is completely different. You have here 3 people who've been involved in the Atlas of Endangered Languages of UNESCO. My colleague Chris, who's sitting there at the front, was the general editor of the UNESCO Atlas of Endangered Languages. And that atlas was done by the Foundation for Endangered Languages for UNESCO. This is why all the people who wrote it were actually working for the Foundation for Endangered Languages, under the leadership of Chris. And when it came to North Africa and the Middle East, Professor Al-Kirat and myself were the co-editors of the region. I tried to put up a tantrum just to say to them, why do we have Middle East and North Africa in the same category? They have nothing to do with each other. I said, linguistically speaking, so we should have North Africa with West Africa. That's a continuum. But it was a big row, and everybody was hiding behind the tables and all that, or under the tables, because they say, who governs the UNESCO? It's the governments who are part of UNESCO under things. It's a UN organization, but it's governed by a board of directors, and the directors are the countries. And when the United States and Great Britain and other peoples have pulled out of UNESCO, it didn't have much money because they contributed 25% of the budget. So a lot of the Gulf state countries poured in the money, and they wanted it to be the Arab states. So which means we have a region which goes from the Canary Islands to Malaysia or something like that, one of those things defined in Washington as the Great Middle East. And shortly thereafter, when we finished it, we tried to continue the things. It was discontinued because there was an internal debate, and the debate, why endangered languages? Now the UNESCO is going to produce the World Atlas of Languages, or the Atlas of World Languages, which defeats. We don't need that because many linguists around the world are already doing this. Chris Gunn is the editor of an atlas published by a British organizer, a British publisher called Routledge. It's just the Atlas of Languages of the world. We don't need that. The whole point of having a UNESCO thing is to have a UN organization protect endangered languages. So we produced this thing, which is the last one. In fact, we didn't even bring a copy. I thought of that. And now it's forgotten because, lo and behold, endangered languages are dangerous, basically. Oh, that's my comment.
Thank you very much, Professor Mir. And last speaker, Professor Kherat.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right.
Okay, let's go back. Thank you, Professor Mohamed. Sorry to get a bit emotional. But the idea of the mountain communities which you brought up, I felt very close because I come from the mountain societies of Central Asia. And some of the research which has been going on in that area try to understand those particular features, because a lot of what you said about collective solidarity, importance of land to these communities, and those are, I think, you find them across mountain societies in different areas. So when, in the context of Central Asia and Asia in general, when they try to understand what are the common features of the mountain communities, one thing which came out was that it is people who move to the mountains, generally those who are not kind of a law-abiding people. They do not want to pay taxes, they like their independence, they want to follow their own way of doing things, cultivate things which they feel like they want to go to war, they don't want to serve in the army, etc. etc. So the point, and when coming to the mountain, right, they develop mentality, what we call a tribal mentality, because in the mountain communities, everyone is dependent on each other. Their doors are open to each other. Without that, they wouldn't survive in harsh conditions. So when they go out, that mentality also becomes a barrier for integration into the larger society. So I'm just wondering, how is the case in the environment in those areas that you mentioned? Can you, what do you think about root causes of their mental state? Thank you.
I agree with you totally. I agree about the universality of what I said. This trinity is universal. I agree. All the mountain people might have something similar, but or might have something the same but different in other aspects. Also, this is true. And also, what you said is true. In our area, all the people who leave or made to leave, or those people who don't abide to the laws of the area, which are cultural laws in many ways. So they go out into other areas where they live. Now, to what extent that will survive, I think the tribal aspect will make it survive very long. Because for the simple reason that the Amazigh people in Morocco and in Algeria and in all of the North Africa have come a long way into history from 8,000 years of existence as people, as a culture, and as a civilization. So it's a test to time, to use simple word. It's a test to time. They are not going to, we talk about endangered, it's true, but the concepts are not going to die out because the people have had that in their DNA, and it's inscribed in their DNA to be together in the mountains. I've seen that in some areas in the mountain areas in Pakistan. The same thing, I've seen it because I've taught all these areas in Iran, you know, in the mountains, in the tribal areas. So it's universal. What you said is, I agree with it 100%. And I think it will continue, it will exist. Mountain people are different from city people or plain people in their conception of the world.
Thank you very much, Mohamed. Professor Qirat, you can go there, please, to ask your question. Because the microphone is apparently not working.
I just want to come back to the issue of mountain and non-mountain being responsible or protected. I don't look at it this way. I don't think it's a matter of being in the mountains or in the plains, but it's a matter of language contact. And here I speak from a real experience. The experience, you know, the environment I have worked on. So when a language or when Amazigh is in contact with Arabic and it imposes, the darija is imposed on the families, and this language contact leads, because of the stigmatization of Amazigh and the whole thing, well, I will finish here. I stood up now. And because I have a case in mind, that's the community, my community I have worked on for 40 years now. I've been working on the Amazigh community. And I have a case here, one of my doctoral students working on another community where there is no language contact. And to my great surprise, because I was actually somehow assuming that the Amazigh is an endangered language everywhere, because I heard from the other doctoral student of mine in Tinghir that he's actually noticing the same phenomenon that has been taking place in Beniznas community, taking place in Tinghir as well. Tinghir, which is known for its activism and support for the Amazigh language. I was surprised, Khadija here working on Taggart community in House area. And I've been surprised to see that the language is really maintained and that the parents are still transmitting the language, children are fluent in the language. So I think it's somehow this language contact thing, the presence of another language which is imposed, because you know that Darija is the lingua franca of Morocco, and that when the child goes outside the home, it's the language that he should master in order to play with it. Peers and so on. This is an experience I have gone through myself. I started as an Amazigh speaker, and as soon as I went to the street, I had to become bilingual, and I grew up as a bilingual both in Darija and Amazigh. So I don't know, I'm sure you are also familiar with this and you would agree with me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Qirat.
Well, I certainly agree with the language contact concept. You know, I wrote an article a long time ago on the influence of Tamazight on Arabic language, and I remember I read the article at a conference in Doha in Qatar, and people almost killed me, saying, how can you, using scientific research, I didn't use any emotional research, but scientific research, it said, how can you say such a thing? How can a language like Tamazight have an effect on Arabic? And we all know that Arabic spoken in North Africa is, for me, is a Berber Arabic. It's not Arabic. It's Berber Arabic. We know that Darija. That's why they don't understand the word when we talk to them, to the people in the Middle East. they never understand that. So language contact, yes, I agree with that. It's a very important point.
Thank you. Barbara, are you still there? Barbara?
Yes, thank you for the,
Your question, please.
yeah, thank you for the presentation. I was wondering, so you said that the newcomers needs to learn the language, no, so to be accepted. So is that, I was wondering, is that the language that makes the community? Do you want to say that, or it's too much? No? Could you hear me? Hello?
Can you please repeat the question, the last part of the question?
Okay, so you said that the newcomers need to learn the language, right? Am I right? Yeah. So you were highlighting the importance of the language, which is fantastic. So do you want to push the concept quite far, saying that learning when they learn the language, they start being part of the community? Is that the language that makes the community, or is that too far away, too much? It's just a question. Then I wanted to know a bit more about the carpet, because I couldn't hear you when you say about the carpet and the birth. It was fantastic.
I think language is very important. Language is not only community, it's the life of community. It's what makes the community thrive. It's what makes the community become sure of itself and continue to exist. I can take here the example of the diaspora. When people went to, people from the RIF went to, in the 50s and 60s, went to work in, rebuild Europe after the Marshall Plan, you know. And they were living in communities. I spent some time there, and they survived because of the language. Because the language was a kind of refuge for them. You know, they say, we spoke Dutch during the day, but Allah, you know, at home we spoke Berber. And at home was kind of a relief to end the day and to speak the language. And this way the language became extremely very important to the community, and that's what makes the community go on and continue to exist.
The carpet, she wants to know something about the carpet.
Yes, considering the carpet, there are lots of things to know about the carpet, you know. I just give you here an example. I've done a lot of work on the carpets and women in Berber. Yes, I discovered a lot of things, a lot of interesting things. You know, that's why we say in the area where I come from that women are the pillar of the society, the pillar, you know, the pillar of the house, meaning the pillar of society. And in the area where I come from, houses are built of mud, and they are covered with thatched roofs, and then there is a pillar in the middle. So it is very important, you know, in our society. So the carpets are an expression that are used by these women who play a very important role in society with the language. And a lot of American researchers have worked on that particular area of all over Morocco. And I think there are lots of things we don't know about carpets. All I can tell you now is what I said is that Berber carpets made by women in Rif area or other areas are not geometrically, you know, right. They are sort of wide at the top and narrow. Yes. So to show that the Berber use it as a calendar for birth.
Thank you, Si Mohamed. Organizing committee allow one more. I'm sorry. Unless if the organizing committee are okay with this, we can exceed.
No, we were.
Okay, one more last question from the researcher you referred to in Kinghir. Si.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for allowing me to ask the question. It's not pretty much a question. It's much more like I wanted to draw your.
It's okay.
I wanted to draw your attention to another element. You talked about the Trinity that has allowed.
Can you come here, please?
Sure.
No one can hear you online.
I know. No, it's all right. So I saw how engaging the discussion was, and I just wanted to add another element to what allowed Imazighen, for example, to keep the language of their cultural identity. And I thought, wouldn't it be the explicit cultural oppression that we have seen for the last 60 years? And every time there is oppression, there is a reaction. And that's everywhere you go in any, you were speaking about mountainous areas. It's very often there is oppression from the state, from dictators, and then there is a reaction. And that was the reaction that we've had in Morocco, is that because of that oppression, we got some sort of a reaction, and the reaction was to keep and hold onto whatever that marked our identity. And now that things are changing in Morocco, that explicit oppression is no longer viable at the international scene. The state has moved into implicit cultural assimilation. And that's why now, for example, you'd see, you're talking about the 50s and the 60s. Tenerife, for example, is as Madame Karat says, is an area where everybody, we never spoke Darija. Growing up, I didn't speak Darija until 7, and I wasn't, my Darija wasn't proficient until I moved to Rabat. But now if you move into the region there, a lot of families are adopting Darija because there was not that explicit oppression, cultural oppression and assimilation. And now because it is implicit, it is in schools, it is on TV, it is everywhere, people no longer feel the need to very much react and to defend themselves. I'll give you another example. When it was an explicit oppression, when it comes to naming, for example, kids. In Morocco, we until recently we didn't have the ability to name your kid an Amazigh name. It was until even recently, 2014, we still had cases in the court, just going around whether I have the ability to name my kid Tunaruz or whatever Amazigh name. Now that things are legally viable and possible to use them, it's no longer a thing to see now. People are not really longer going to name their kids Imazigh because it's very much implicit. It's there is I don't want to go too long, but there is a little bit of a linguistic conditioning now that has happened to Imazigh. They don't know it. So unfortunately,
Thank you.
I agree, what you said, but there is something else which I think is very important, is pride, cultural pride. Because now, where I come from, there is this strong cultural pride in Tamazight, in the language, and all that goes with it, in terms of trying to make it revitalize it, make it strong, and make it everyday language. And that's why I'm saying all these people who go from the interior, we call it the interior, to work there, they realize that if they don't speak the language, they are not going to survive very long. So they learn on a daily basis. They stay there, but they learn, and when they start communicating, people start opening doors to them. And I think that's the pride that the Amazigh people, I think that pride exists everywhere, but in certain degrees, attenuated in some areas, but is stronger in other areas. Because the reason that there is that pride, because people realize that it's their language, it's their culture, it's their future.
Thank you. Professor Stan, any concluding remarks before I...
Well, more than concluding, just a couple of remarks on that, what you just said. In fact, we're talking about oppression, and that's always a very strong thing. And I mentioned earlier the first spring, the Berber Spring. It was a direct reaction to totally wanton oppression in that sense. And then when you mentioned the names, and it was the same in Algeria, for instance, all things. when the decree came that you could not give your child a Berber name, overnight there were 500,000 Masinisas and Jugutas and Yubas and everything. People had never heard of them before, and now everyone knows who Masinisa is, who Yugurta is, who Yuba is, and the whole culture is coming back again, going back to the 8th century BC or something like that. So yes, oppression is a thing, but we have to keep in mind that you don't have to wait until you're oppressed. So
Just, cultivate. So,
cultivate what you have, cherish it, as you say, pride, and develop it. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I declare public apology for Hanan because of time constraint. I really thank all the presenters, the four of them, Sarid Kufman Simon, Fakhruddin, Professor Barbara, and last but not least, Mohamed Chtatou for this food for thought. Thank you very much indeed.